Let's talk about the most egregious media error of the week. In fact, one of the most in recent memory. This involves ABC News showing video from a gun range in Kentucky that they said was video of a slaughter in Syria.
It's legitimate to tie the aid to corruption. It's legitimate to tie the aid to foreign aid from other countries.
We saw the transcript. We've had Ukraine say, no, there was no quid pro quo. They've even said that they didn't even know the money was being withheld.
When I watch the House impeachment proceedings, I am both perplexed and appalled. I hear them saying to the American people, you're so stupid, you can't govern yourself.
They said Clinton will never forget that she and her rich and powerful friends, her allies in politics and in the media, will make sure that you are destroyed.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome to a brand new week of broadcasting here on the American Family Radio Network. Brian Fisher is my name. The program is Focal Point. I am your host, amiable, congenial, convivial, and effervescent.
As always.
Glad to have you in the conversation as my likewise congenial, convivial, amiable, and effervescent listening audience. Want to remind you to go to afr.net. You can audio stream the program there. So if you got friends up here in the Pacific Northwest that are drowning in a sea of liberalism and they want some voice of reason and sanity and truth, you can send them to Focal Point and afr.net. They can audio stream it at afr.net anytime they wish. Also get an AFR Talk app for your phone. Listen to it on the go. Also at afa.net, you can get our columns. I've got two columns up there that I want to draw your attention to. One on Syria. Made a guest appearance this morning on Tim Wildman's program, Today's Issues, to talk about my perspective on Trump's pullout of Syria, and I support it, by the way. Encourage you to go there and read it. Anyway, let's just jump into what we want to talk about today. By the way, breaking news today. This just broke this morning. Mitt Romney, it turns out, has a secret Twitter feed. Had, anyway. Since he's gotten busted, he's taken it private so nobody can get to it. But in the days of the internet, they've got a Wayback Machine for Twitter, and nothing. It's preserved forever. You send something out on Twitter, doesn't matter whether you delete it, doesn't matter what you do, it's there forever. And Mitt Romney's Twitter handle, if you're ready for this, is Pierre Delecto. Pierre Delecto. That's his Twitter feed. So a running mate with Carlos Danger. So Pierre Delecto and Carlos Danger out there running rampant through the world of the internet. And Mitt Romney used this Pierre Delecto Twitter feed to not only poke at Donald Trump, but also to exalt himself. Nobody knew who Pierre Delecto was. So Mitt figures nobody will know that it's me the man behind the curtain. So anytime Romney came under some kind of criticism, you could go to Pierre Delecto and you could find this completely neutral, completely objective, completely nonpartisan assessment of Mitt Romney and his glowing character. So that's the latest on the political front.
So you mean he used this pseudo Twitter feed to make himself look good on his own?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's like people hitting love or like on their own Facebook posts.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's what he was doing. So, you read through the Twitter feed of Pierre Delecto, you say, man, that Mitt Romney, what a dude. Too bad that guy's not running for president again. All right, well, let's turn our attention to the Word of God, which is how we like to begin the program. And we're looking at the life of Jacob right now and his return to the Promised Land. Remember, God had given him the promises. Says, you are going to be the heir of the promises I've made to Abraham and to your father Isaac. Promises that have to do with descendants more than the stars in the sky. And I'm going to give you this land. This will be your inheritance for me. Every place on which you set your foot I will give to you. And Jacob was the one that was the heir of all those promises. God is now closing the circle in Jacob's life, had taken him away to places hundreds of miles away. He had to flee from Esau because Esau was going to kill him. Then he had to flee from Laban because Laban was going to catch up to him, maybe was going to kill him. And then he had to flee from the men of Shechem because they wanted his hide. So now Jacob has made a complete circle, coming back to Hebron, where his father Isaac is still living. Now in Genesis, and the reason Jacob was on the run here is he had to run because, remember, he had cheated Esau out of his inheritance. And once he swindled Esau out of Esau's inheritance, he knew he was in big trouble because Esau was pretty good with a bow and an arrow and with hatchets. So he took off. He split. Jacob, his dad, Isaac, said, you got to get out of Dodge because your life is toast. You stick around. So God met him on his escape journey at a place called Bethel, which literally means house of God. Bet is the Hebrew word for house, and El is the Hebrew word for God. So that Jacob named that place Bethel, and later the tabernacle was set up there and other kinds of things, named it as the house of God. And it was there when Jacob was just worn out after running for his life. He laid down, laid his head on a rock, used a rock for his pillow, and as he dreamed, he had one of these dreams. It's from God. Not all of our dreams are, not even most of them are for God, but sometimes God will speak to us, reveal himself to us in a dream. That's what he did for Jacob at Bethel, and he saw this stairway, this set of steps, ladder-like steps going up into heaven. And angels were going up this ladder, and they were coming down from heaven back to Jacob. And that's where God revealed himself to Jacob, spoke to him, and promised him that he would be the heir of the promises that he had made to Isaac. So verse 1 of chapter 35, God said to Jacob, now this was after the men of Shechem had ravaged the sister of the sons of Jacob. Her name was Dinah, and the heir in Shechem, which was a prominent town there, he had seized Dinah, the younger sister of the brothers, the sons of Jacob, and they had ravaged her. And the sons of Leah, Simeon and Levi, they took vengeance, which is how you did it in those days. This is how you got justice. The oldest male survivors would be the ones that would be responsible to administer justice, and they did it. They went to Shechem. They tracked down every male that had any part in this, and they killed them all. And now Jacob had no part of that. It wasn't his idea. He was kind of asleep at the switch, even though it was his daughter that had been ravaged. So now he had to leave town. He had to get on the run from the men of Shechem before they caught up to him and killed him. And Jacob was not happy with his sons, Simeon and Levi, for what they had done. He says to them in chapter 34, you have made me stink to the inhabitants of the land. That's what Jacob says. You made me stink to these people around, so we can't stay here anymore. So Jacob says in chapter 35, let us arise and go up to Bethel. That's where he'd slept on a rock and seen the vision of God, that I may make there an altar. Listen to this. This is great. An altar to the God who answers me in the day of my distress, and who has been with me wherever I have gone. So Jacob says, look, I've been in a whole ton of scrapes, most of them of my own doing. I've caused most of the trouble that I've been in, but when I've encountered these days of distress, what I have done is I have called to God, and he has answered me every time in the day of my distress, and he has been with me wherever I have gone. Even when I've been the one that's made the mistake, he's answered my cry, lifted me out of the pit that I dug for myself, and set me on my feet. Now, the word about Simeon and Levi and what they'd done in Shechem, which is a major city in the land, they got out there, got around pretty fast. And so Jacob knew that he was persona non grata everywhere in the land of Canaan. Everybody would be gunning for him. And here's what happened in verse 5. As they journeyed, listen to this, a terror from God fell upon the cities that were around them, so that they did not pursue the sons of Jacob. And so he came to Bethel, and there he built an altar in the place called El Bethel, because there God had revealed himself to him when he was on the run from his brother. So here's another one of these displays of the grace of God. You know, Jacob had conned his brother out of the inheritance, had cheated and deceived him, and got himself in a huge jam due to nobody's fault but his own. He had no one to blame but himself, entirely self-inflicted wound, and he found himself on the run for his life. And what you would think, if we were doing theology man's way, we would think, well, if God has called a man to something and he pulls a stunt like this, then God would wash his hands of the whole thing. He would forfeit God's plan, God's purposes for his life. God's going to wash his hands of him. All of that is done. He's going to set Jacob aside. He's going to go off and find somebody else to work with. But God didn't do this. And that's where this is the lesson for us today. Even when we have dug a hole for ourselves, even when we have done stupid or evil things that have created jeopardy for ourselves and the people we love, God will answer us on the day of our distress. He will manifest himself to us. He will provide us with counsel and direction, and even bless us. He will protect us as he did here from harm. In other words, what happened is Jacob and his sons were moving toward where they were headed, which is toward Hebron. People wanted to go and kill him, but there was something that held them in check. There was some sense that they had, hey, we better not touch these people because they have the blessing and the favor and the protection of God. And the implication here is God be willing to do the same for us. Protect us from harm and accomplish every single purpose he has for our lives. You know, I saw a Bill Murray movie once, and he was trying to rally a bunch of ragtag soldiers to do their duty, do their job. And his pep talk, he says, men, we are Americans. He says, you know what that means? That means that our forefathers were kicked out of every decent country in the world. Well, that was kind of Jacob's story. But God found him. Every time he'd get kicked out of a place, God would find him. Jacob would cry out in his distress. God would meet him, lift him up, and set him on his feet. So, you know, and sometimes our lives might seem like Jacob's life. I'm sure I'm talking to somebody out there that can identify with this. You get into one situation, and it seems filled with promise. The skies are blue, the sun is shining. You think you're going to spend your whole life there, and it's going to be great. But things go bad, and you have to move on, and there can be a lot of pain associated with that, a lot of hurt associated with that, a lot of disappointment, a sense of loss. Then you move on to another situation that likewise is filled with promise and hope, and then that situation seems to go bad. You have to move on again, and again things are ragged, and they're wrenching, and they're painful. Some of them might even be our own fault, but the lesson of Jacob's life is that God still has his hand of favor and grace on us, even when we have made a hash out of things, and he will answer us in the day of our distress. Well, if you're in a day of distress or you know somebody who is, we're going to pray right now, and I want you to think of that person, hold their face and image before God. Might even be yours. Ask him to help. Let's go to prayer together. Lord God Almighty, I pray this day for myself. I pray for my family. I pray for the listening audience of Focal Point, everybody right now listening to the sound of my voice. I pray for our elected officials, for our mayors, for our governors, and for our president, President Trump, that you will reveal yourself to us as you revealed yourself to Jacob. I pray that you will speak with us as you spoke with him, and bless us as you blessed him. I ask you to give us direction for our lives and for our work. When we are in distress, I pray that you will answer us in the day of our distress and be with us wherever we go. May we be fruitful and increase in number, both in natural and spiritual offspring. Renew and fulfill every promise you have made to us. I pray that we will build an altar to you in the Spirit every place we go and worship you there. May we purify ourselves from any form of idolatry and from anything that would defile us in body or spirit. As the terror of God fell upon the towns around Jacob so that he and his family were protected, I pray that any in the unseen world who have evil intentions toward us will sense the power of your protecting presence and be restrained from causing us harm. May we come to the end of our lives as Isaac did, old and full of years. Amen. is gone, he has got nobody to defend him, and that nobody would include yours truly. All right. Now, Andy McCarthy's column is called The Trivialization of Impeachment. And I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about that because I think this is a very, very important column. And what Andy McCarthy says in this column is that when the Founding Fathers put impeachment in the Constitution, they put it in there as the ultimate check on a reckless and out-of-control president, a president that was completely abdicating the responsibilities of his office, that was dangerously off course, that threatened the stability of our Republican form of government. And so the founders put impeachment in there because presidents are elected for a 4-year term, what do you do with the president? You can turn a guy out after 4 years. That's part of what's kind of silly about this rush for impeachment right now. The Democrats are going to have an option less than 13 months from now to turn this guy out of office, put him out to pasture. That's why the founders had regular scheduled elections so that the people consistently would be able to choose their own leaders. Their own rulers would be chosen by the people. So nobody except Supreme Court justices had lifetime appointments, and they didn't even have them. They only served during good behavior. They could be impeached and removed from office for bad behavior. Now, nobody does it anymore. There's a lot of bad behavior. A lot of Supreme Court justices should have been removed. Everyone that voted for Roe v. Wade, for instance, should have been yanked out of there. But it's fallen into disuse, so it's as if they have lifetime appointments. But every elected official has to stand for re-election, and Mitt Romney's turning the barrel comes up next November. So the Democrats could turn him out in 13 months, but they are so eager to carry out this coup d'etat that they're going after him right now. And what Andy McCarthy says, look, in using impeachment to do it, this trivializes what impeachment was designed to be. Impeachment was designed for truly abominable misconduct, not for something that you said on a phone call, which was perfectly defensible. You know, Mick Mulvaney got in trouble for defending what Donald Trump had said on his phone call with the president of Ukraine. And I want to review what the president said and why it's perfectly okay, perfectly legitimate. People are using this phrase quid pro quo. They got it all mixed up. They got it all messed up. Doesn't even apply in this situation. When it's nation to nation, that's how nations do business. Quid pro quo. You give me this, I will give you that. You agree to this, you will get aid from the United States of America. Same thing happening in Ukraine, where Donald Trump says, look, we have reason to believe that the Ukrainians, people from Ukraine, interfered with the 2016 election. And we are investigating that. Our Attorney General, Bill Barr, he's investigating that. And Jeff Dunham, is it Jeff Dunham? Durham? John Durham? Whatever, the guy, the other U.S. attorney that's helping him investigate this, saying, look, Bill Barr and Dunham are going to be investigating this, the meddling, the possible meddling of other countries, Russia and Ukraine included, in the 2016 election. Will you cooperate with that investigation? And there's no point in there where Donald Trump says, if you don't cooperate, I ain't sending you a penny of money. Never says that. So from that standpoint, I'll give you this if I get this. There was no quid pro quo. And even if there was, even if Donald Trump had said, unless you help us investigate and root out corruption, there's going to be no money for you, that would be perfectly appropriate. If there is election meddling, if there is fraud that's connected, corrupt practices connected with our elections, if foreign actors are interfering with the electoral process, the question is, does a president have a right to get to the bottom of that? Absolutely he does. Does he have a right to enlist allies to assist with the investigation? Absolutely he does. So what Donald Trump brought up in that conversation, would you look into this? We have reason to believe that Joe Biden's deal or that his son's deal with China and with Ukraine was corrupt. Will you look into that for us? Because we cannot afford to have foreign actors interfering with our elections without any kind of penalty. And Jeff, it looked like you might have had a thought to add to this whole deal.
No, it was just John Durham. John Durham is the U.S.
Okay, John Durham. Not Bull Durham. John Durham is the other guy that's participating in the investigation. So Andy McCarthy, look, this is bad. Using impeachment the way they're using it now, this is not good. It is very bad. It is very wrong. It trivializes it. They're turning it into a political tool to undo an election. That's what this is all about. You can't impeach a president because you don't like what he's doing. That's what elections are for. You don't like what a president's doing, you vote him out. You get a chance to do that every 4 years. Impeachment does not exist for that purpose, and that's how the Democrats have prostituted the impeachment plank in the Constitution. And what Andy McCarthy warns is, look, if they get away with this, if they use this for routine political disagreement, which is what this is really all about, instead of for abominable misconduct, it cheapens the threat of impeachment. And what it means, and this is going to fail. This is going to fail miserably. Now, there's some speculation that there are X number of Republicans that are going to vote to impeach Donald Trump. They're going to vote to convict him. There is no way in the world that is ever going to happen. Donald Trump is not going to be removed from office through impeachment. There is not a Republican senator who has a brain in his head. Well, now that I think about it, that opens up some possibilities. But if any thinking Republican senator, there's no way he votes to impeach and convict Donald Trump, because his political career would be over at that point. That's a kamikaze mission. That's a suicide mission. He would blow himself up by voting to remove Donald Trump from office. The only person could do that is somebody who didn't see the video of Donald Trump's rally in Dallas, Texas. On their feet, cheering, crazy. And one of the two biggest applause lines that Donald Trump got in that rally, number one, going to build the wall. They love it. The base loves it. That's what they want. They want Donald Trump's wall to get built. So woe to the Republican senator that tries to obstruct that and remove him from office before he can get that done. Number two, bringing troops home from Syria. They love that. They don't want to see our boys in harm's way for no discernible purpose. We have no national interest in Syria. We're even there because Barack Obama took us there of his own accord. He never got authorization from Congress to go into Syria. He just did it because he didn't like Assad, and he wanted to do a favor to the Russians and to the Iranians. That's who Obama was dancing with the whole time. So we're there fighting Obama's war. And Trump says, look, I'm done fighting Obama's war in Syria. We are pulling out. But what Andy McCarthy says, look, if the Democrats get away with using impeachment for this tawdry, partisan, political hackery, then they are going to lower the value and the threat of impeachment. And pretty soon the next president is just going to ignore it altogether. He's going to say, oh, you want to impeach me? Knock yourself out. Because he will know that he has nothing to fear. Now let's grab a couple of sound bites while we're here. Let's go to clip number 4, just enough time to squeeze this in. This is Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana. Let's listen.
When I watch the House impeachment proceedings, I am both perplexed and appalled. Here's what I hear Speaker Pelosi and Chairman Schiff saying to the American people. You're stupid and we're smart. I hear them saying to the American people, you're so stupid, you can't govern yourselves. I hear them saying, you're so stupid that you chose President Trump over Secretary Clinton, and we've got to fix it for you. I hear them saying, you're so stupid, we're not going to even show you the evidence. You can't handle it. We're going to do all of this behind closed doors and then tell you what we're going to do. And I find that appalling. I find it perplexing, Neil, because I read all these stories about Speaker Pelosi, and what an extraordinarily talented politician she is and how she's a strategic thinker and a major tactician. And I think to myself, does she really believe the American people are going to fall for this?
You know, and I think what Senator Kennedy's saying here is exactly right. What the Democrats are communicating by the way they're going about this is stuff we've been talking about all the time. They think we're stupid. They think we are ignorant, that we are uneducated, that we are unintelligent. We're not smart enough even to know how to run our own lives. So they got to make decisions for us about where our thermostats have to be set, about how much water we can use in the shower, and now who has got to be our president. I think we're stupid. Let's be right back.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Good to have you in the conversation. We're talking about the Democrat folly on this whole impeachment thing. You know, and the reason, there's one reason why the Democrats are pursuing impeachment. I want you to think back to what I just said. They have an opportunity to unseat him at the ballot box in 13 months. Why don't they wait? Because they know they can't defeat him. They know the only way they're going to be able to get Donald Trump out of office is now to rush pell-mell down the hill and try to get him out through impeachment. Because they're not going to be able to do it. They can't defeat him in an honest election. They don't have anybody in their field that can defeat Trump, and they know it. You know, it's interesting to me. You know, I've been reading more articles here from secular press, talking snake media press that say, look, the Democrats, here's a headline from Stanford no, it's a Washington Post article. Democrats wonder which of their candidates can beat him. And it's a list of all the Democrat candidates and what's wrong with them, why they're not going to be able to defeat President Trump. Not even the wacky, wavy, inflatable arm flailing Cherokee tube woman is going to be able to defeat. You know, and this shows you how bad things are. You'll love this. I don't know if you saw this. You know, Oprah Winfrey is a high-profile Democrat. She finally threw her hat into the ring this weekend, and she told us who she wants to run for president under the Democratic banner. It's the head of Walt Disney. So Oprah Winfrey wants Mickey Mouse to run for president. That's how desperate the Democrats are. They got nobody that can beat him, and they know that that's the case. So this impeachment thing is just born out of sheer desperation. All right, we heard Kimberly Strassel just before the break talking about how the Democrats are just using impeachment as a partisan political tool, never intended for that. That's why the bar is so high. That's why it takes 2/3 of the Senate to remove a president. You got to have 2/3, so there has to be a nationwide consensus that this president has so exceeded the norms of acceptable conduct for president that the whole nation wants him gone.
Yeah, we didn't play the Strassel. We played the Kennedy.
Oh, I played Kennedy. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll play the Strassel here in just a second. You know, but Kennedy saying, Senator John Kennedy saying, look, what they're telling you by doing impeachment is they think you're stupid. They can reverse their election decision, the election decision of 2016 in 13 months. They don't want to wait, and they think you're not smart enough to run your own life. Now, here's Kimberly Strassel. She is a columnist for the Wall Street Journal, pretty shrewd observer, and here she is on Fox and Friends talking about what the Democrats are doing here.
Look at their own words. They say that the original fence was that Donald Trump demanded a quid pro quo, that he was going to withhold Ukrainian aid for the Ukraine unless the country gave him dirt on Joe Biden. We saw the transcript. We've had Ukraine say, no, there was no quid pro quo. They've even said that they didn't even know the money was being withheld. So on that charge, no. What you do see now is them moving the goalpost to suggest that even smaller offenses are somehow impeachable. But this is a risk. If we're going to turn impeachment into a partisan political tool, every party is going to use it against each other.
All right, so that's Kimberly Strassel. That's a good word. Same thing that Andy McCarthy was saying. You trivialize impeachment like they're doing. You turn it into a partisan political tool. You've vitiated the Constitution, and you've created an enormous amount of social unrest for no good purpose, because this is not going to succeed. I think the Republicans are going to come to their mind. There are 4 Republicans that are in possible trouble next November. Every one of them having a little bit of trouble raising money. They're being outraised by their opponents, Tom Tillis in North Carolina, Joni Ernst up in Iowa, Martha McSally down in Arizona. And there's one other one whose name escapes me right now. But they're having a little bit of trouble raising money against Democratic opponents. If they want to ensure their defeat, Cory Gardner up in Colorado is another guy that's in a little bit of trouble. You know, and Susan Collins up in Maine, who's a Democrat anyway, I don't think anybody's going to shed tears if she goes down. But the point here is that every one of these Republicans, if they want to win re-election, and trust me, they do. I mean, I've been around politicians enough to know that the only thing that matters to them at the beginning is getting elected. And then after they get elected, the only thing that matters to them is getting re-elected. So everybody's going to come around. Trust me on this. All the Republican senators are going to come around, and not one of them is going to vote to convict Donald Trump and see him removed from office. Not even Pierre Delecto is going to do that. So it's not going to happen. So all this Sturm und Drang for no good reason, just creating a lot of difficulty. You know, and you look at these polls. I'm looking at this one poll, Pew Research poll, talking about how many Democrats want to support impeachment. 54%. 54% of voters, not Democrats, 54% of registered voters want support impeachment. But what they don't, you got to dig way down in the internals of the poll to find out that they oversampled Democrats by 14%. In other words, if you choose the people that you want to poll and you oversample them, you can get any result you want when it comes to a poll with regard to impeachment or any other sort of thing. Now let's back up to Mick Mulvaney, clip number 2. Again, I'm defending Mick Mulvaney. Maybe he didn't say this as eloquently as he could have, but he never used the phrase quid pro quo. He was accused of saying that, yeah, President Trump did a quid pro quo deal with Ukraine. And he's on Chris Wallace yesterday, who's no friend of conservatives. Now that Shepard Smith has gone from Fox, Chris Wallace is the face of the opposition. He is the face of the resistance to Donald Trump. But here's what Mick Mulvaney said to Chris Wallace, clip number 2.
It's completely legitimate to ask about that. Number 2, it's legitimate to tie the aid to corruption. It's legitimate to tie the aid to foreign aid from other countries. That's what I was talking about with a 3. Can I see how people took that the wrong way? Absolutely. But I never said there was a quid pro quo.
Because there isn't one. Another example of a quid pro quo, and how it's perfectly normal, perfectly acceptable, people do it all the time, is what President Trump did. I talked about this on Friday, but what he did with the Central American countries that were complicit in this overwhelming flood of illegal alien immigrants we're getting into our country. He withheld money from them. He said, look, you are either going to apply to become a safe country, so people are eligible for asylum in your country. They don't have to come all the way to the United States to get asylum in a safe country. They can find it in your country, because otherwise we're going to send them right back. And they all agreed. And you're not going to get our $170, $200 million from the United States unless you agree to do that. Every one of them did, and the money was released. That's a quid pro quo. That's how nations do business. So if you've got electoral corruption that's affecting American elections, the president has a right to ask Ukraine or any other country to help us with that, and he can even do it with a quid pro quo. No money unless you do, and it'd be a perfectly legitimate request.
My mother used to do quid pro quo all the time. I couldn't have any dessert until I finished the vegetables. I couldn't go outside until I cleaned my room. I mean, isn't that quid pro quo?
That's quid pro quo. I mean, parents have
quid pro quo.
Parents have mastered that technique. That's a very good observation. All right, let's grab clip number 5. This is our old friend Jim Acosta weighing in on this whole Ukrainian scandal.
That investigating Joe Biden was at the heart of this, but he did acknowledge that, yes, part of the deal in order for Ukraine to get this money that was being held up was to investigate what had happened in 2016.
So Acosta admits that this is what was going on, that there was a connection between what happened in 2016 and Ukraine. Remember Paul Manafort? He was Donald Trump's campaign manager for a time, and then it turns out he took some funny money from Ukraine. And he's in prison today for taking funny money from Ukraine, and the Democrats hammered that. Look at that. He's over there in Ukraine. This is corrupt. He's taken money from Ukraine, and he's dabbling in our American elections. He's got to go, and he's behind bars. He's in prison today. All right, well, let's grab clip number, well, we just played the Mick Mulvaney clip. I want to follow up on this clip from Jim Acosta about this whole deal. Did you know, by the way, that it is part of American policy to combat corruption in Ukraine? That's an official part of American policy. There's so much corruption in Ukraine, it has such a reputation for corruption, that it's officially a part of America's public policy. So very ordinary for a president to put conditions on aid having to do with corruption in Ukraine. And President Trump didn't even do that. He didn't say no $391 million for you unless you cooperate in our investigation. More coming out. This is National Review on Hunter Biden. And by the way, Joe Biden, I don't know if you've realized this, but he's toast. He's done. He is finished. Lackluster performance in the debate. Tried to defend his son. Couldn't do it. Democrats widely thinking, look, he's still leading in the polls, but they think he's severely limping, and I believe that they are right. And, you know, all the way back in 2015, a U.S. State Department official, this is under Barack Obama. This is not under President Donald Trump. This is under Barack Obama back in 2015. A U.S. State Department official said that he had gone to the Obama administration and expressed concern over the fact that Joe Biden, as vice president, and having Hunter Biden in these highly placed, highly lucrative positions in the Ukraine was a conflict of interest that may be contrary to America's public policy. This is an Obama official. Went to the Obama administration and said, look, I think you better be careful here with this Joe and Hunter Biden deal. That's George Kent was the one that testified that. And he was worried that Ukrainian officials would use Hunter Biden's position at the company to influence his father, that it would be bribery. You'd have a vice president of the United States who would be subject to bribery because his son was getting, according to this story, for a time, getting $80,000, $160,000 a month for a period of time. Wouldn't want to lose that. Ukraine would say to Hunter, look, if you want to keep your spot and your $80,000 a month coming in, you better tell your dad to get Obama to back off. That's corruption. And it's legitimate to be concerned about that, and that's what Donald Trump was asking about on the phone call. You know, so to me, if there was quid pro quo, my response to that is, so what? We need to have foreign interference in the 2016 election. We need to have that looked into. Ukraine was potentially a part of that with this corrupt deal with Hunter Biden. So Donald Trump was completely within his rights to ask Ukraine to look into that. So anyway, about $3.4 million made its way from Ukraine into the bankroll of this company that Hunter Biden started in the United States. All right, well, let's shift gears just a little bit. You know, the Clinton email probe. Let's play Tulsi Gabbard's clip number 6 first. Here's Tulsi Gabbard. She's technically running for the presidential nomination, Democratic Party. She's nowhere, polling at less than 3%. But she made some noise over this weekend by attacking Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton said about Tulsi Gabbard, she is a Russian asset. And Tulsi Gabbard fired back. Here's an excerpt from an ad that she did to respond to Hillary Clinton. Clip 6.
People warned me in 2016 that my endorsement of Bernie Sanders would be the end of my quote-unquote political career. They said Clinton will never forget that she and her rich and powerful friends, her allies in politics and in the media, will make sure that you are destroyed. Well, there have been countless hit pieces full of smears against me from day one of this campaign. They've tried to destroy my reputation and my lifetime of service because I stood up to them. I've spent over 16 years of my life proudly serving in the Army National Guard. I still serve as a major today. I volunteered to deploy to the Middle East twice. I've served in Congress now for nearly 7 years, serving on the Foreign Affairs Committee, the Armed Services Committee, the Homeland Security Committee, and I am not afraid to openly express my love for our country. But if they can falsely portray me as a traitor, then they can do it to anyone.
So Hillary Clinton, she becomes president. She wants to be president unless Mickey Mouse beats her out. This is what she can do to anybody. She can do to anybody, you and me, what she did to Tulsi Gabbard. Now, speaking of somebody who escaped corruption, Hillary Clinton, the State Department has finished its investigation into her emails. Remember those 33,000 emails? She said, there's nothing there. It's just yoga exercises, just wedding invitations, all that kind of stuff. Well, the State Department concluded an investigation that nearly 40 people committed violations in her email situation. 38 of these people were culpable in 91 cases of sending classified information to Hillary Clinton or receiving classified information from her that were in her personal server in the closet of the bathroom out there in Colorado, wherever that thing was. There were a total of 588 violations involving Hillary Clinton's emails, 588 violations, and the State Department couldn't assign blame in 497 of those. What that tells you, there's still some deep state people in the State Department put there by Obama, and they're still there. That's it for today. Bow low before God, stand tall before man, Stand in the gap and never forget, with God's help, we are fighting a winnable war. See you back here tomorrow.